Chapter 2 Adapt. Maui, the discoverer of the secret of fire, was spearing birds with his brother one day. But as his spear had no barbs, their prey escaped them. Maui's mother told him to use sticks to create barbs for his weapon, which he did. They feared on Keru that night. Go for the gap. When you're on top of your game, change your game. Somewhere over the Indian Ocean, on a long, disconsolate flight between South Africa and New Zealand, the new All Blacks assistant coach Wayne Smith turned to Darren Shan, his team manager, and told him, "We have a dysfunctional team. If it's not fixed, I won't be back." The All Blacks had just lost to South Africa 40-26, finishing last in the annual Tri-Nations tournament. For a team attuned to winning and with the highest kill rate in world sport, it was a disaster. But as Bob Howard tells it in his final word, worse was to follow that night at the team hotel. A court session, a mock trial fueled by the forced consumption of alcohol, had left some very famous faces chronically drunk, some so much that they were worried for their lives. It was later reported that some of the Springbok players, billeted in the same hotel and returning from a meal to celebrate their series victories, had to extract various All Blacks from hallways, bushes, and gutters and put them in the recovery position. Something had to change. The way we were going was not going to cut the mustard in the professional era, says Gilbert Anaka, the tall, personable mental skills coach. You can't work all week and then have Saturday night through to Monday off where you bloody drink and sink. Graham Henry, the head coach, had only recently been entrusted with the top job in New Zealand sport. After the debacle, Smith slipped him a note insisting that we fix this thing. It was the beginning of a long, painstaking, and often painful process that eventually led to Rugby World Cup glory. With these men, Henry, Smith, Hansen, Anoka, Shan, together with the players, achieved is a case study in transformational culture change. Its lesson applicable well beyond the rugby field. Will Hogg believes that effective organizational change requires 4 key stages. The absence of any one factor the management consultant says will inhibit culture change and often make it impossible. 4 stages for organizational change. A case for change. A compelling picture of the future. A sustained capability to change. A credible plan to execute. The case for change for the All Blacks was clear. Performance was subpar, both on and off the field. I wasn't in the room, says former All Blacks captain Anton Oliver, but it started by Tana Umaga, the then captain, saying, "I don't really want to play. I'm scared of playing. I'm not enjoying it." Everybody had been locked in their own little islands feeling the same thing. They had lost, to use Gilbert Naka's phrase, the being of team. There was a strong case for change. Next, the team required a compelling picture of the future. In the next chapter, we look at the role of purpose and personal meaning and how a 3-day crisis meeting set the framework that would culminate in Rugby World Cup victory. First, though, there needed to be a clearer strategy for change. This was articulated by Graham Henry, as reported in Final Word and repeated in interviews, as the creation of an environment that would stimulate the players and make them want to take part in it. Henry realized that the world was changing and the All Blacks, like any other business, and it is a business, were competing on the open market for the best human resources. He reasoned that an active focus on personal development and leadership would create capacity, capability, and loyalty. Third, the team required the right sustained capability to change. This meant eliminating players who were seen as hindering the chance for change, and more importantly, building the capability of those who remained and those who joined. This centered on a dual management model in which responsibility was handed over to the players so that they had, in Henry's phrase, more skin in the game. It also involved, and this is where Henry the educator excelled, the creation of a learning environment which acted as a step ladder of personal and professional development. The creation of a leadership group as well as individual operating units in which players took increasing responsibility for team protocols, principles, and culture gave structure to this strategy. Captain Richie McCaw believes it to be the most important innovation of Henry's reign. Leaders create leaders. Fourth, the team required a credible plan to execute. In this, the leadership with their unique shared structure excelled. Steered by Henry, the men were able to develop and deploy a self-reflective, self-adjusting plan that developed the technical, tactical, physical, logistical, and psychological capabilities of their collective. The plan traversed years, seasons, series, weeks, days, and even the seconds the match clock traveled as it counted down to the final whistle. It was a plan executed in public on the field of play but calibrated behind the scenes, and which led to the most successful period of All Blacks rugby in history, and a small gold cup. We shouldn't be too surprised that the All Blacks culture had begun to rot from the inside. Unless intervention occurs, all organizational cultures do. The court sessions, a hangover from the days of amateurism and a byproduct of New Zealand's wider binge drinking culture, were merely a symptom of a more general and inevitable process described in graphic form by the sigmoid curve. Though it is tempting to see life, business, society, and success as part of a linear progression of constant and never-ending refinement and growth, the opposite is true. Like most things in nature, cultures are subject to a more cyclical process of ebb and flow, growth and decline. According to Charles Handy, The Empty Raincoat, this cycle had three distinct phases: learning, growth, and decline. In the learning phase, we often experience dips in actual performance as we feel our way through the unfamiliar. Think of Tiger Woods relearning his golf swing, or the teething period in which a new CEO gets to grips with the issues of an organization. Then once the learning has become embedded and momentum builds, so growth accelerates. This is the growth phase. Rewards follow, praise and blandishments too. Soon we're on top of the game and on top of the world. We're incredible, we're invincible, our success assured. And so begins the fall. The decline phase hits us much like the early twinges of arthritis in a middle-aged person. At first, an anomaly. It eventually becomes the painful norm. Soon we're staring at the hollowed out cheeks of an old person in the mirror, wondering whatever happened to our gilded youth. The key, of course, is when we're on top of our game, to change our game, to exit relationships, recruit new talent, alter tactics, reassess strategy, to make what Handy describes as sigmoid leaps, a series of scalloped jumps along the sigmoid curve, outwitting inevitability. As a leader, this is one of our primary responsibilities, and the skill comes in timing these leaps. When to axe your star performer, when to blood new talent, when to change your game plan altogether. As the Encyclopedia of Leadership asks, What steps do you need to consider taking so you can prepare for the second curve without prematurely leaving your current success on the first curve behind? This is the quintessence of Kaizen, the Japanese notion of continuous improvement. The idea, writes Bonji Tozawa in a professional white paper, is to nurture the company's human resources. Originally, Kaizen was less a productivity enhancer than a culture creator, a way in which Japanese business could engage and inspire their workforce to, in Graham Henry's strategic statement, stimulate the players and make them want to take part in it. Organizational decline is inevitable unless leaders prepare for change, even when standing at the pinnacle of success. The military have an acronym, VUCA, V-U-C-A, volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. VUCA describes a world prone to sudden change, unknown consequence, and complex shifting interrelationships, one that is difficult to decipher, impossible to predict. For the military-industrial complex, VUCA means asymmetric warfare, geopolitical instability, and unreliable loyalties. For business, it means structural collapse, credit crises, reputation damage. For individuals, it represents career insecurity, rising prices, housing market illiquidity, and uncertain future. For leaders, it means dealing with decisions that involve incomplete knowledge, sketchy resources, and the vicissitudes of human nature. In his seminal paper, Destruction and Creation, the military strategist John R. Boyd created a theory with direct applicability to a fast-changing environment. To maintain an accurate or effective grasp of reality, he argued, one must undergo a continuous cycle of interaction with the environment to assess its constant changes. He asked himself, how do we create the mental concepts to support decision-making activity? His answer was the decision cycle, or OODA loop. OODA stands for Observe, Orient, Decide, and Act. It is quick to apply and useful for everyday decision making. This is data collection through the senses, a visual, auditory, tactile, olfactory, taste, as well as more modern metrics. Like an animal sniffing the wind, we gather the raw material for response.